This is a creamy tempeh, aubergine and potato bake. It comes together in 30 minutes. It is packed full of protein from the tempeh. You've got some other parabiotic benefits from that as well. Aubergine, which has got phenolic acids that are anti-inflammatory, plus carrots and a whole bunch of other veg that give fiber and lots of other benefits that you're going to learn about whilst we teach you how to cook it.
Doctor's Kitchen. Recipes, health, lifestyle.
In the kitchen today, we have food producer Orla.
Hi.
This recipe that you'll find on the Doctor's Kitchen app, it's sort of inspired by moussaka, which is like a dish from Balkans, Middle East. Many different countries have their own versions. It's usually a layer of meat that's stewed in tomato sauce with herbs and spices. But why is this one different?
It's completely plant-based, so there's no meat. We use tempeh instead. Yeah, the bechamel sauce is also completely plant-based, so we replace the butter with olive oil, and then we use a bit of nutritional yeast instead of cheese.
Just by reducing the meat content, the cheese content, the egg yolk content, you are reducing your saturated fat, and we know that reducing saturated fat can have an improvement on your LDL cholesterol or your ApoB lipoproteins that are correlated and causative of cardiovascular disease. If you want to hear more about that, I've done plenty of podcasts talking about cholesterol.
So first thing we'll do is we'll slice up our aubergine.
Great. So we're just going to do what, like
so you want it to
1
be like
centimeter?
half a centimeter, 3/4 of a centimeter thick, and we're going to roast it. Traditional moussaka fries it, which is delicious, of course, but it's just like easier when you're cooking at home to bake it. So
This is still going to be delicious.
It's oh my God, it's so
This is still going to be
delicious.
delicious.
I love to deep fat fry things. Like in a restaurant, that was my favorite cooking technique. They used to tell me I should go and work at Taco Bell because I just loved it so much. It's such a fun toy, but like the reality is most people don't have that at home.
Absolutely. So I'm showing you how to chop these in that thickness. You don't need to watch me or Orla chop these vegetables, so we have one done before.
Yeah, we did before.
These aubergines that I've had a drizzle of olive oil on, a little bit of salt and pepper.
Yeah.
Put into the oven at
180 for half an hour.
That's step number one.
Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to grate our tempeh.
Great.
Yeah, it's a great way to cook tempeh.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's the first time Orla's on the show and she's bringing the dad jokes.
So this is a really good way to cook tempeh because I find a lot of people, if they're not familiar with tempeh, they can find the texture a little bit vexing. I like the texture personally, but this is a good way to do it because it just kind of helps it like kind of melt into the vegetables and it just becomes quite like innocuous.
Tempeh is one of those ingredients that gets a bit of a bad rap because people have had bad tempeh or they've bought it from the supermarket, they don't really know what to do with it. It's a phenomenal product for a number of different reasons. A, the tempeh fermentation process actually creates live microbes and it has a parabiotic effect, so it actually has some of those probiotic benefits when you consume them on your microbes. We know that that fermentation process actually increases the protein content of the soybeans that are fermented to create tempeh, so it's actually a little bit more protein rich than things like tofu. Tempeh is linked to better cognitive outcomes in older adults particularly, and a shift in your microbiota that improves the diversity of those microbes and your overall picture, your overall pattern of microbes as well. So overall, tempeh is a fantastic ingredient to get into your diet, whether you choose to eat meat or not.
So we're gonna turn on the stove and then we're just gonna fry it off in a bit of olive oil with some salt and pepper just to get it going.
We've got these veggies that we're going to add to it. We've got our onion that is very finely diced. If you can't finely dice it like this, don't worry about it. How long are we going to do the tempeh for?
We're just going to fry it off for like 3 or 4 minutes just to kind of let it absorb some of the salt and pepper, get a good like base flavor and kind of get a little bit, tiny bit crisp before we add all of the veg and tomatoes and spices that we're going to add later.
Yeah. Whilst that's cooking, I'm going to tell you about carrots. So there was a recent big umbrella review of carrots and the consumption of carrots and a link to a reduction in the likelihood of cancers. Now, those kind of reviews show correlation, not necessarily causation, but it is pretty impressive when you look at like the constituents of carrots. So things like quercetin, which is a plant chemical that we know has anti-inflammatory properties. It also has beta carotene, which is the preformed vitamin A that we know is good for eye health. We know also it does contain carotenoids like lutein, zeaxanthin. There was this sort of myth that if you eat carrots, you can see better in the dark. That was sort of like a semi-myth, because there are some ingredients that will reduce the progression of things like macular degeneration. You'll find better sources of lutein and zeaxanthin in things like egg yolk and kale. So actually having those ingredients into your diet is going to be probably more important, but I would certainly introduce lots of different types of ingredients like carrots into your diet because of all those different benefits and the fact that it adds to your fiber content, your overall fruit and vegetable consumption. It's a really, really good way of adding diversity to everything that you eat as well. So carrots first, in they go.
I love carrots. Carrots are my favorite vegetable.
Oh, great. Oh, really?
Yeah, because they're so versatile.
Yeah.
There's no other vegetable, I think, that can go from like a plant-based moussaka to a cake as seamlessly as the carrot.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Celery. So your dicing skills are amazing.
Thank you.
We have made the start of the bechamel sauce. We're using plant-based milk. There are plenty of plant-based milks out there, some better than others. A lot of people have heard about like oat milk. There are particular brands of oat milk that, whilst they're quite popular, they are really processed. And there's some really interesting anecdotes of people wearing continuous glucose monitors, also known as CGMs. They have their plant-based milk in the morning and it just skyrockets it. And it's because they do contain quite a lot of refined carbs, gums, fillers. They're not great for your gut. But there are some other plant milks that are fantastic, like 3-ingredient plant milks. That's all it really takes, you know, a bit of pulp from almonds, water, and a little bit of sea salt. Like that's a good quality plant-based milk in my opinion. We have a little bit of onion, probably just enough cut of some of the onions that we use because we're going to strain this. Black pepper, salt, nutmeg, which is a wonderful addition to your food. It's up there in terms of the ORAC scores, which is an antioxidant measurement tool called ORAC. It's up there with things like cinnamon and clove. What else is in there?
Black peppercorns. We're going to use parsley as a garnish, so I put the stalks in there because why not?
And that will just sort of warm through, impart the flavor, and then we're going to strain out those ingredients, and then we're going to add flour, a bit of olive oil.
Because it's catching.
Oh yeah, go for it. That's a good little tip there actually. So when you're cooking, and especially because we're using stainless steel pans, you don't have that non-stick coating, which on one side it's like really useful to have like non-stick coating because you're going to get less likelihood of catching on the bottom and things aren't going to stick as much. On the other side, it does have some of these toxic chemicals that we know shouldn't really be introduced into our food, and there are a whole bunch of effects on inflammation, obesity, your propensity toward type 2 diabetes. So as a preference, use stainless steel where possible.
We're going to put in the garlic, and then we're going to add 3 tablespoons of tomato puree.
Tomato puree is an interesting one as well. You can actually use a couple of tablespoons of this, and this will give you the same lycopene benefits. So the antioxidant you find in tomatoes as like a whole bunch of tomatoes, and because it's cooked down and concentrated, you're getting a higher hit of the lycopene. So I love to just like add some tomato puree to stews or curries just to add a little bit of sweetness and some of those extra antioxidants as well. So top tip.
So then we'll have a teaspoon of cinnamon, a teaspoon of oregano, and half a teaspoon of thyme. And then we'll add 400 mils of tomato passata.
Okay, so it's all in?
All in. Okay, so then we'll do the bechamel.
Yeah.
So we have to strain this.
You could fish it out, I guess, if you wanted to, but it's just easy to strain.
It's just easier to strain it. So we're going to make a plant-based roux with olive oil instead of butter. 2 tablespoons of olive oil.
This is literally how I would cook. Is that all right? That's about 2 tablespoons, right?
Yeah. And then 3 tablespoons of flour. And you just give it a little whiskey.
It should be clumping like this because we're going to add the milk back in and we're going to whisk.
Just like a third at a time.
Yeah.
And we'll give it a little whiskey. Not a doctor's kitchen recipe if you don't cram in as many vegetables as you can. So it's a green bechamel. So we're just gonna put in some spinach to our bechamel and just cook it for like a minute or 2 to let it wilt down. And then the last thing is to the tempeh sauce, we're gonna add a tablespoon of balsamic just to lift it up.
Nice.
This is our bougie Merlot balsamic.
If you didn't have balsamic, what else could you use?
Red wine vinegar, just that little hit of acid at the end. I used to work with this head chef. He was a really eccentric gay man, and he'd be like, you just need to lift the tits, you know? So that's what the vinegar does. I think that looks good. I think we can start to layer it up.
We're gonna put the tempeh mix at the bottom and then add your aubergine. So let me talk to you about aubergines, kids. So aubergines are actually botanically a berry.
What? That's crazy.
They're full of things like anthocyanins, which give the dark purple skin, and actually inside the flesh you've got those antioxidants like quercetin. These are a fantastic ingredient. They are from the nightshade family, and I've done a podcast on nightshades and why certain people are allergic or slightly intolerant of nightshade, so things like tomatoes, potatoes, and aubergine, because they do have glucoalkaloids that can be irritant to the gut lining. Some people find that it worsens things like arthritis for them. For most people it is tolerable, but you will know if you do have sensitivities to those, and it might be worth excluding nightshades in certain circumstances. The vast majority of people, it's actually something that you can tolerate, so I would 100% recommend you try this recipe. Potatoes?
Potatoes.
I'll let you do the honors
Okay.
for these.
Give the potatoes to the Irish
Not
person.
the God, this is how I'm gonna get cancelled. I'm so glad we added greens to the sauce. So good.
Aren't you?
Yeah.
An extra plant point.
An extra plant point indeed. I'll use half of this.
Yeah.
See, healthy cooking can be like indulgent and delicious, and you know, this is gonna taste luxurious.
And it doesn't need to look perfect because it's gonna get a big layer of sauce on top.
Exactly. This is the
Stress
thing.
free.
Absolutely. We are going to put this bad boy in for half an hour at 200 degrees centigrade, fan assisted. So it's been around half an hour. The kitchen is smelling beautiful. That nutmeg is really coming through, and we're going to take this out the oven. Wow. This is looking wonderful. It's got exactly that crispy top that we're looking for. Bubbly, delicious. All nice and brown edges. This is exactly what you want to just put down in front of your family and just dig in. Wait for 5 minutes.
Wait for 5 minutes.
Before diving into this, just to let everything settle down, and so it's easier to serve as well. Oh, yeah. That is amazing.
Should we try it?
Yeah, let's try it. Let's try it. The nutmeg, we only like grated a little bit of nutmeg here, but it really just come through.
I mean, pretty good.
Oh, so good.
That's a great recipe.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
You'll find this on the app. Make it with your family, your partner, your kids. They'll absolutely love this. This is so good for you. And if you want to try out more recipes, you'll find them on the app and at the Doctor's Kitchen as well.